Hello, I'm Terrence McNally, and welcome to Freeform, a world that just might work. I'm going to be speaking today with ARLIE HOCHSCHILD. She's Professor Emerita of Sociology at UC Berkeley, and she's the author of Strangers in Their Own Land, Anger and Mourning on the American Right. The show airs as specials on KPFK 90.7 FM in LA and streams weekly on the Progressive Voices Network on TuneIn. Podcasts are available anytime, anywhere, on Apple Podcasts, most major podcast sites, and at my site, terrencemcnally.net, TERRENCEMCNALLY.net. Let me just say that as we continue to confront the surging coronavirus pandemic, I encourage you all to do your part. Social distance, wear a mask in public, find ways to help those in your community hurt most by the social isolation and the economic devastation. Okay, today, if you enter Armed March January 17 in your browser, you will find lots of stories about the planning of an armed march on the Mall in DC and all 50 state capitals on the Sunday before the inauguration. I found an explicit poster for exactly this on gunandgame.com. The poster reads, "When democracy is destroyed, refuse to be silenced." It announces the march. It says, arm yourself with discretion. And then it lists actually the addresses of all 50 state capitals. And I found this poster in about a minute. And this was a day or two before the FBI put out the warning that it has put out about just these threats. So perhaps this is what's coming on top of what took place on January 6th. As so many have said, though what is happening is shocking, it's not surprising. I've got a number of huge questions. How did we get here? How bad will it get? How do we turn things around? And today's conversation will be a start in those directions. But first, let's go back to 2016. Soon after that election, I discovered a quote from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, most famous for writing Little Prince, and it said, "If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea." And that day, 4 years ago, I wrote the following: "Passion to return to a simpler past drove enough voters to the polls in swing states to decide the 2016 presidential election. How can we engage their emotions in a more positive, forward-looking, progressive direction? Is it even possible to generate a vision of a future that is as welcome, compelling, inviting, and real as the past so many fondly remember?" And in early 2018, I spoke about all of this with today's guest, ARLIE HOCHSCHILD. For over 30 years, her inventive, provocative, and useful insights about contemporary work and family have grown out of real-world research. She's long focused on the human emotions which underlie our moral beliefs, practices, and social lives, and is known as the founder of the sociology of emotion. She's the author of several books, including Second Shift, The Time Bind, and The Outsourced Self. And at the core of her 2016 book, Strangers in Their Own Land, Anger and Mourning on the American Right, is the power of a deep story. After 5 years talking with folks in Southern Louisiana, Hochschild sensed that a particular deep story they share is what holds their political contradictions together. Now, I pretty much believe Donald Trump is a singular phenomenon. But what baffles and haunts me more than Trump himself is the 74 million who voted for him after 4 years in office, after 30,000 lies, after separating children from their parents at the border, after nearly 400,000 dead from COVID-19. Now, it turns out that ARLIE HOCHSCHILD has continued to talk with the folks that she met researching her book. And so I turned to her again today to try to make some sense of my fellow Americans and try to find some path back from the brink of chaos and breakdown that seems possible in the days and weeks ahead. Welcome, ARLIE HOCHSCHILD, to Freeform, a world that just might work.
Thank you. Very nice.
And let me tell listeners, we're recording this conversation Tuesday, January 12th, 2021. So first of all, how are you? How are you and your family coping with the resurgent pandemic? I know you're up in the Bay Area. I'm in Southern California. We're suddenly the epicenter.
Yeah, well, we're sequestering and feel lucky that we're not in a tent for the homeless or in prison, unable to get medical care. So doing okay, but those around us aren't.
Yeah, yeah. Any responses to my introduction?
Yes, I thought it was excellent. And it sets, I think, the stage for what we need to be looking sharp for in the near term. And it also points to the long-term work that lies ahead for any progressive or moderate. Um, I think the first thing that it's easy for us to focus on the Boogaloo Boys, the Three Percenters, the Proud Boys, who are rootin' tootin', terrifying the rest of us, and then to say, oh, well, all 46.9% of American voters who voted for Trump are like that. That is not true. That many people, we're talking about a good chunk of mainstream America, did vote for Trump and voted for him just recently after they saw 4 years of who he was. And I think any thinking person has to say, well, wait a minute, let's back up. What did they see in him, and what did they not see in the alternative? In other words, after I did spend 5 years from 2011 to 16 hanging out with people who became ardent Trump supporters. They were around Lake Charles, Louisiana. And I went there just to back up because I was baffled by a red state paradox. How could it be that across the nation, it is the poorest states, the states with the most disrupted family, with the worst health care, the worst schools, underfunded schools, the most exposure to pollution, the lowest life expectancy, are also those states which receive more money from the federal government in aid than they give to it in tax dollars and revile the federal government. That is the red state paradox. In other words, that's the big picture. Those are the Trump voters. Louisiana, where I ended up, turned out to be an exaggerated version of that red state paradox. Second poorest state in the whole country, 40% of the state budget came from the federal government, and overwhelmingly very conservative and very pro-Trump. So we have to get curious and open about what it is, why they didn't see anything else. And that kept coming up through the 5 years of getting to know people. What I did was just tell people, hey, I'm from the Bay Area. I'm a retired sociology.
Let me even ask, and we didn't go into sort of that level of nitty gritty when I interviewed you last time, but to say that you said this to someone in a coffee shop, in a park. How did this, this person from Berkeley even get to where she's having that conversation?
I knew one person in the whole state of Louisiana who happened to be the mother-in-law of a former graduate student of mine. And she had invited me, come to Lake Charles, I'll help you get started. And she was a progressive, but her best friend was ardent Tea Party person. And the two were friends, were sorority sisters at Louisiana State, and went to cultural events together, had been neighbors. So that's how I got started. I said, could we start with a series of kind of rap groups, some progressive and some conservative. And then I interviewed everybody on both sides. And from the conservative focus groups, I got a woman who introduced me to the Republican Women of Southwest Louisiana. And so I went as the guest of a Tea Party advocate who knew who I was. And then at the lunch table over gumbo, I would say, hi, I'm, Janice's friend. And I'm worried about the divide. I feel like I don't really know anyone on the other side of this divide, and it could be getting worse. And so I'm here to, if you will let me, kind of write about you and get to know you. And what I would hear back.
And let me ask, at that point, Arlie, let me ask, did they say, wow, this is a problem we care about too?
Yes, they did. They did. We care about too. And that what came after that was, but we think that you think we are the flyover people. We don't, that we're ignorant. We think that you think we're deluded, that we're ill-educated, that we're prejudiced, that we're racist, we're homophobic, we're sexist, and you're wrong. You know, we think you just fit us into your stereotypes and project hate and ridicule on us. And we hate that. So if you're coming to find out who we really are, then welcome. If not, not. So I said, I definitely want to get to know who you are. And I would do it by saying to
yeah. Did you feel for a little while like you were sort of on probation, you know, that you had to prove yourself? And finally, there was a day when you realized you'd made it?
Yes, yes. But, you know, it didn't take long for them to see that I meant what I said. And I think that's because I took my moral and political alarm system off and permitted myself a great deal of curiosity to get to know who they were. I'll give you an example of how that happened. I was sitting around the table at Republican Women in Southwest Louisiana, Lake Charles, Louisiana, and a woman around the table said, "Oh, I love Rush Limbaugh." You know, the radio commentator, very right wing. And part of me thought, oh my God. And then the other part of me thought, oh, you know, I'd love to talk to you and see what your what it is you like about him. Well, that, can we meet for sweet teas? You know, yes, tomorrow, let's do it. And so she began saying, I love Rush Limbaugh because he hates feminazis. Well, I may have told you, you know, you just in the introduction said I'm the author of The Second Shift, Working Families and the Revolution at Home. So I thought, oh my God, I hope she hasn't Googled me. She had not. And then I asked her, what do you mean by a feminazi? And well, it's a mean, hard, tough woman who basically heartless was the picture. I go, whoa, okay. And then we went on to environmental wackos. What is an environmental wacko? Well, it's a person who... It's another
Limbaugh term?
Yes, that's another Limbaugh term. And it refers to someone she felt worshiped animals and animus, basically.
Loved other species more than humans.
That's right. Yeah. And that if you are a hardworking blue-collar guy working in the petrochemical industry, which most people in Lake Charles do. This is enemy. You can't put the spotted owl ahead of raising a family on a fair wage. And so it fell into that category. But she stopped me and said, "You've told me that you don't agree with things that I believe. You've told me that." I said, "Yes." And she said, "So was it hard for you to hear me and listen?" I said, "Actually, not at all. I have my alarm system off. I'm not here to tell you about myself. I'm here to learn about you and you. I am so grateful for this encounter, and that it means so much to me, and thank you for that." And then she said, "Oh, I know what you're doing. I do that with my kids." And she was the wife of an evangelical minister of a megachurch in town. And I do that with my husband's parishioners. And so then we had that in common. It was literally the only thing we had in common. But after that, she said, "You know, do you play cards? I'll get you to play cards with me." And it went from there.
Wow. Because one of the things that in looking at my notes and pulling this together and so on, I kept thinking, but if there's going to be, if we're going to take your singular case, your singular research and build on it by the rest of us trying to engage similarly, we've got to think that both sides are willing to listen, that both sides are willing to turn the alarm system off. And you found that although you said, "I'm not here to talk about myself," my guess is that in 5 years, some of their curiosity must have, in other words, they must have drawn you out as well.
Less than you think. Not as, I think I came away with the feeling people had a great yearning to be heard, to be understood, and that there was starvation for that. Now, people in the book are now visiting me, and I have here in Berkeley, and some wonderful.
Does the worm turn? Are they there sort of exploring? Yeah. Now that the two, so that I know you talk about in an interview you did recently about exchange students within America.
Yes,
which we can talk about in just a second now that I brought it up. But in other words, in some sense, you and these people are now exchange people within America.
That's right. And one woman that I wrote about in the introduction to Strangers, who sells a medical insurance in the outskirts of Lake Charles to workers who get hurt quite often and can't wait a week to pay the medical bills. She is a very strong Trump supporter, but her son is a Bernie supporter. And so she brought her son with her to visit us, stay with us. And their conversations are a model for the nation. They're very loving and they're very close, and they couldn't be farther apart. And I took them both to around the UC Berkeley campus, thinking that the son might be interested. And we stopped to hear Robert Reich giving a lecture to 700 students, a stunning lecture. And the son loved it and the mother did not. So, but there's good feeling all around. And this mother, her name is Sharon Galicia, has helped establish this high school project. She has cooperated. Her daughter is involved in it. Where across the nation, I think it's now up to 45 different schools in about a third of the states. It grows week to week. Our own granddaughter's involved in it, where high school students, it could be sophomore, junior, senior, get on a Google Meet, become part of what's called the American Exchange Project.
If people wanted to look it up, that's what they'd look for, the American Exchange Project. Okay.
Exchange Project. And so you don't talk politics. What you do is get kids from one region talking about whatever they're interested in with kids from another region. So the anchor is the South and the North, Massachusetts, Louisiana, back and forth. They're exchanging and getting coastal kids to go inland and inland kids to go to the coast. And you aim for a 3-week visit, mutual. South goes north, north comes south. And actually, after Lake Charles suffered its third hurricane, it was basically severely damaged. The kids in the north had befriended the kids in the south. They wanted to get up a contingent to go down to Lake Charles and help them rebuild.
Yeah. And that was during COVID, and so they were unable to, or
That's right.
So okay, we're now, I mean, we've left the armed protests, the armed insurrection, and we're dealing with humans back and forth. So that I don't miss this opportunity, your advice, you as I read in the introduction, having done sort of this, you've been doing research on people at work and people balancing their lives and so on. You're skilled at this. This is part of your training, part of your experience as a human being. What advice do you give to other people who are willing to try this?
Well, first, I would give advice to President Biden. I think he should get a cabinet level person in charge of instituting a national program. First, get a team of people to go around the states collecting good ideas about how to heal this divide, and realize that way before Trump, there was a great deal of grievance, and that had circumstances behind it, and to see if we can really grasp the serious differences in understanding each other's circumstances and understanding the different truths that we now live in. This goes to the bottom of the matter, I think. I went to Lake Charles and thought, Trump supporters and Tea Party people, I thought, this isn't a different political culture, it's a different truth. That is the source of new.
And if you went originally in 2011, everything about that different truth, that separation, that different reality has just accelerated and accelerated to what we see now.
Exactly. It's grown far more, it's grown deeper and more angry. I think more serious. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the power of Trump alone from day one, saying fake news and, really reinforcing what was already an echo chamber tendency, I think has been like an enormous chemical catalyst to that, and then social media in 2011.
Right.
We didn't live in the bubbles we do. So what you sensed even then has only gotten worse in the 10 years since.
Right.
And yet you're saying that Biden should make this, if not a cabinet level actually, but cabinet level priority.
Yeah, to put it morally first, to see if he can address this divide. You know, we used to have mechanisms that mixed and matched Americans of different races, different social classes, and different regions. The compulsory draft, for example, did that, whether you liked it or not. It did put people together where they really got to know each other. They were buddies on a battlefront, and it knitted America. We used to have a very strong labor movement in this country, which again mixed and matched people. And the labor movement is, shrunk greatly. It's not.
Well, I mean, let's say one thing there, which is that the right-wing politicians who have attempted since, say, the Powell memo or so in about 1970 to crush the labor union movement, I don't think they even necessarily realized they were doing this. They knew that labor unions favored Democrats, so but I don't think they were even conscious of what they were taking from America when you crush the labor union movement.
Right. But I would say that on the liberal left, there hasn't been a sufficient effort to reach out and understand where people are coming from.
Oh, absolutely.
And that actually there's some research that shows that the left tends to live in tighter political bubbles than the right does, and that the left is more likely to guess wrong about what the right thinks than the right is to guess wrong about what the left thinks. There's recent research on that, and that's because Democrats tend to live on coasts, they tend to live in large cities, and they tend to be educated, have BAs, and that puts them in bubbles that they don't create or particularly advocate, but that do inform.
That are self-reinforcing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how to figure out ways to counter that, so we're not just throwing spitballs from inside our fortresses. I mean, I worry honestly about that, about the enclaveness of the liberal left.
It's absolutely worth worrying about. I mean, well, for one thing, problems like a pandemic, problems like climate change, problems like inequality, even problems like systemic racism are national and global problems.
Yes, that's right.
We no longer are trying to solve local problems. It isn't if we could get that factory to open, or we could get that, the problems that are existential problems demand cooperation, collaboration. It's like we're driving blind, into these dangerous things ahead of us if we can't do this. What I would like to do now is shift, and I really thank you, by the way, for going into that detail of this woman at this, lunch, because I think to make it really real for people, and to even maybe give them a sense of the experience they might be able to have if they're willing to turn off their alarm system and listen. I found in an article and an interview you did recently, you talked about the evolution of the story, of the deep story. So to get to that, what I want to say is that, as I referred to in the introduction, one of the keys to Strangers in Their Own Land is through these many, many, many hours and years of getting to know these people and interviews and so on, you found there were sort of the reasons they would state of why they might hate the government and love Trump. And then you found that you felt underneath those stated reasons was a deeper story. And as you describe it, kind of like a dream, a story of metaphors, a story of dream images almost. And so if you would share that deep story that you discovered in Southern Louisiana.
Right. You're standing in a line. This is the right wing deep story. There is a left deep story, but we're just focusing on the right deep story. You're standing in a line, and before you on the top of the hill is the American dream. Your feet are tired. You feel like you've worked hard, that you played by the rules. You don't hate anyone. You feel, okay, right wing deep story. You feel that the main fact is that you're just, the line isn't moving. And one guy said, I haven't had a raise in 2 decades, not moving. You just look at the people ahead of you. You do not look at the much longer line behind you, okay? You're frightened, in fact, to look back. So you are just measuring yourself against people who are doing better and are closer to that American dream. And in the first moment of the deep story, you see line cutters. Ah, well, who are they? Those would be African-American women who finally, through federally mandated affirmative action, have been given access to jobs that used to be reserved for men and for whites. Oh, well, they're line cutting as you...
Well, I mean, at one point, that line only had white men in it.
That's right. And I myself would be a line cutter as a woman professor. And then you saw refugees and undocumented workers cutting line. You even see the oil-soaked brown pelican, Louisiana state bird, which actually went extinct because of the contamination of the petrochemical industry. It's waddling ahead and line. And so all these line cutters are putting you back, and you're distressed. You feel a loss, economic loss, demographic loss, cultural loss, racial loss. And then another moment of the right-wing deep story, you see Barack Obama waving to the line cutters. That's how it looks to the right winger. And oh, so he's a line cutter too. He's just doing it for them. He's not noticing me or us. And then in a final moment of the right wing deep story, there's someone who's ahead of you in line and who turns around and says, you racist, sexist, homophobic, stupid, backward redneck. You know, someone you saw on CNN, someone you saw on MSNBC, some comedian.
Yeah, or in the case of Hillary Clinton and the deplorables,
Exactly.
just like captured it, you know,
Exactly.
bullseye.
You deplorable. And that's it. Then they think I'm a stranger in my own land, and this is alarming and distressing in this. So there's no answer to the loss and sense of decline. Okay, that is the right-wing feelings. These are, you take, what is a deep story? You take facts out of a deep story, because actually Blacks have not been cutting in line if you look at their socioeconomic status. And so you take moral precepts out of the deep story. It's just what feels true to you. And I made this story up and went back to the people and said, well, now does this, how do you feel about this story? And a guy said, you read my mind. Another guy said, you know, I live your metaphor. And so that did feel true to them.
Yeah, and that as I said, is really one of the threads and cores of that book. And let me just say one thing that maybe doesn't need to be said, but that before they started noticing the cutters in line, they were stagnant.
Yeah.
Real wages have not really risen since '73.
Yes.
Inequality in this country has gone crazy. Labor unions have shrunk. You know, especially where they are, the environment has gotten worse and they haven't moved forward. They were correct that they were getting no closer to the American dream.
That's right.
Because of automation, because of globalization, because of all those sorts of things. And they were not going to get the job that some younger person just coming out of college was going to get, or they weren't going to. But then that would have been one thing.
Right.
But
right.
then it was that sense that the Democratic Party, progressives, city people, university people, elite people had favoritism toward others, that if we're all stuck, someone else is getting the benefit.
That's right. They've got it for themselves. They can afford fancy, expensive schools to smarten up their kids, to come to look down on folks like us. That was the feeling. They felt left behind. In fact, I have thought of the deep Tea Party and now deep Trumpism followers as the elite of the left behind. They are not the abject poor, but they live in rural areas, small towns, blue-collar towns where economic prospects have dimmed. So they feel in a sector that's going down, but they're the people who've scrambled hard and tried hard, and are small town leaders within that declining sector.
Mm-hmm. In other words, the abject poor can't afford to go to DC.
That's right.
On January 6th.
That's right.
I mean, there was even that woman who took her private jet. But no, I see what you're saying. It's the one other thing that you say is that rural worker, one of them told you, I don't feel that different from an urban Black poor person, correct?
Right, that's right. Yeah, I had, I'm now doing interviews in Appalachia, and I had a guy tell me quite recently, you know, I was born in a holler. My parents wouldn't let me out of the trailer because there are just so many drugs around. It's murder 4 trailers down, and I'm poor and I'm dumb, he said, but I don't see any difference between me and some Black guy in inner Detroit, except the music.
So let me tell people that this is Free Forum, a world that just might work. I'm Terrence McNally, speaking with ARLIE HOCHSCHILD, Professor Emerita of Sociology at UC Berkeley, author of Strangers in Their Own Land, Anger and Mourning on the American Right. And we are talking about A, what went into that book, but B, what has happened since. And as I said, you have said chapter 1 of this deep story is the line and the cutting in line and what we've just laid out. But one of my main questions when I decided I want to talk to you is, how has that story evolved? How did we get from I'm willing to vote for Trump and give that guy from The Apprentice a chance because those other people don't care about me, to what is, at least some people, armed insurrection and a total belief in a lie?
Yeah. Chapter 2 of the deep story is Donald Trump comes to power and says, I will make America and you, your social class and your race, great again. And I am for you and you are for me. And in this chapter 2, he does something with shame. Again, I think we always have to look at underlying feelings. A lot of people on the declining sector have felt, gosh, why aren't I doing better? I'm working my ass off. I'm really trying, and I'm not getting anywhere. Others are doing better, and I don't know, must be something with me. And a lot of people, there's been a new split. It used to be in 1970 that whether you had a college degree or not didn't make a difference to your family life, didn't make a difference to how often you went to church or coached football or basketball. Or it didn't make a difference to your whole social biography. But now, sociologists have found there's a growing and growing and growing now huge gap that if you, it's almost arbitrary, you think, but if you have a 4-year BA degree, you're likely, if you're a guy, to be living with the mother of your children, to be going to church, to be have friends, to be volunteering, to have a social life, and to have a steady job. And if you're out of that job, you're looking for a job. But if you don't have a 4-year degree, a different social story gets attached to it. You're more likely to be out of the labor force. You're more likely to be suffering an addiction, what they call diseases of despair. You're likely to be on your 3rd girlfriend and not living with the mother of your children. You're not likely to be being with your kids and raising them directly. There's a whole different biography, and I think shame is associated with it. So,
can I cut in 1 second, Arlie, and just mention to folks, as well as to you, a couple of interviews I've done over the last few months with Nick Kristof and Cheryl Wu Dunn about their book Tightrope,
yes,
which is he does in his hometown of Yamhill, Oregon,
right.
what you, to some extent, what you did in Louisiana and now doing in Appalachia, only with people
Those
that
were his friends.
the people he'd grown up with, the people who he'd been on the school bus with. But it's all around Case and Deaton's work on deaths of despair.
Exactly.
And then Mary O'Hara, do you know her book? What Mary O'Hara, who grew up in abject poverty in Dublin during the Troubles, her book, and the damn it, the title is escaping me right now, but it's about shame. That's why I bring it up. She says that the notion of get up by your own bootstraps and that your poverty is your fault,
right,
is one of the most crippling things going on here.
She is so right. I just think that's essential. And so in this second chapter of the deep story, what we have is Trump managing that undeserved shame. I think, this is my speculation, my interpretation, that if you watch him over the last 4 years, what he has done, and on a daily or weekly basis, is to do something outrageous, and then the press or other commentators shame him. And, oh, how can you do that? No, that's terrible, you know. And then he rails against the shamers. It was, you know, they shouldn't be shaming me. This is the treasonous press. He gets angry. You know, the deep state, the Democrats, all these enemies are shaming him. He makes himself the victim of their shaming. And in a way, his anger at the shamers is cathartic for his followers. You're getting rid of the shame. You go tell them, those shamers. And I think he has a secret, emotional secret, even an emotional strategy to win his followers in this chapter 2 of the deep story by relieving them of shame. So it isn't just taking them to the promised land, it's getting them out of very painful, unpromised land.
Yeah, so Mary O'Hara's book, by the way, is called The Shame Game, and it's about the narrative that tells you that the narrative of poverty that says it's your own fault. I highly recommend it. So yes, no, I mean, I can remember when we spoke years ago that as I watched the 2016 campaign, it felt to me that every criticism of Trump as unfit, which was basically all they did for the last few weeks of that campaign, that and I know you and I agree with this, it's that someone watches that and says, wait, this guy is I was about to curse, this guy is a damn billionaire.
Yeah.
He's a big shot. He's a TV star. He gets whatever woman he wants. He has his own plane, and he cares about me. And all you can do is put him down. And that identification with the first rich billionaire celebrity who looked out for me.
Recognized him. Yeah, yeah. I love the
that every attack on Trump's fitness was taken as an attack on me, and thus reinforces my alignment with him, my, everything, that reverse way. Now, so chapter 2 is I'm suffering for you. Look at how I get nothing but attacks. I'm suffering for you.
Yes, and in I'm suffering for you, it borrows a kind of religious metaphor.
Very much so.
And imagery that Trump sees himself as a victim who is suffering not just for himself, but others. He's taking their shame away and he's taking their pain away, doing it for them.
And by the way, you said perhaps consciously or strategically, I think everything we've heard from his niece to anyone who's written about him in New York is that it's pretty real. That his feeling that New York elites never accepted him, or maybe even Daddy never accepted him, but let's stay with that New York elites, that he never, no matter how much he made or how successful he was, or so they never. That I think it's quite real that despite all he has, he does feel that legitimately.
He feels, I think you're right, legitimately the victim of other people's snooty critique. And so there he is, receiving the stones and arrows of Democratic contempt.
Well, and whatever he does,
I don't know how much they are fitting into that narrative. And the more they criticize him or put him down, the more they strengthen Trump.
But if I may, it's not like you can say, well, I'm going to back off then and say he doesn't need to be impeached. I don't have to, I don't have to rail against separating children from their parents. I don't have to rail against canceling clean water rules, or racism. You do. But the bind is that, in doing so, you reinforce his power. That's I think that little equation is what explains why more votes after 4 years than 4 years ago.
That's right. I think so. And I think you have to distinguish the set of measures that he's put out there from the guy himself, and go after those measures. Get local spokespeople. In other words, their research has been done, just to go sideways here, how do you talk across the political divide? What you do is you get credible communicators from their own communities to talk to them. In other words, on climate change, there's this climate scientist, Kathy Hayhoe, whose husband is an evangelical minister. and she's a very firm Republican, but she thinks climate is a real big issue. We may lose the earth if we don't turn our policies around. Get her to talk to them because they already admire her. They're very solid in their political convictions. If we could get the Kathy Hayhoes on a range of 20 issues to talk to the on these issues to the convinced, I think that would be great. I think that's the way to go.
Now, when you say if we could get, is she doing so on her own?
Yes, she is.
In other words, I have a friend who kind of went right wing after 9/11 and never sort of came back. And when I talk to him, he says, well, I understand how they feel, right?
Yeah.
And I say, well, if you disagree with their policy idea, but you understand how they feel, are you working to, to reach them? And is she doing so?
I don't have the answer to that, but I know I've met a bunch of people. There's a woman who's for the green tea party. She's Tea Party, but she's green. She's all for solar. There are a lot of people actually that cross over on particular issues and who would be happy to be respectfully approached and find common ground.
Now, by the way, you have pointed out that there are a lot of groups attempting to do what you're talking about, right? I have the numbers here somewhere, but there are a lot of groups who are attempting to bridge these gaps and get over these things. Are there any that you find, here, this is a quote from more than 70 grassroots groups interested in Across the Divide talk, this is from back in 2018, have risen across the country, living room conversations, Bridge Alliance, Common Good, Better Angels, etc. How is that movement these days?
It's alive and well. It's not getting the microphone, but the people are all still trying to do this. And it's ever more important. It's just that there's no focus on it because the polarization, the extremes on both sides have been emboldened in recent days especially, and are the focus of attention.
Both in that self-reinforcing loop of social media, as well as in the mainstream media.
Well put. But going back to the chapters from the
yes.
story to
I think you said the arrival. Here's someone. The deep story already existed. Now Trump arrives to embody it. Then the suffering.
He becomes the deep story president as an answer to their distress, and says, "I am suffering for you." And then I would say the next chapter is, "You suffer for me." Okay, onward quotes. Christian soldiers. I mean, not everybody Christian is in this, but he's appealing to others to suffer with him and for him. And we've come to a chapter now of where he's arranged for himself to go down in flames, and yet almost through a resurrection to have, I mean, his essence ever more present. So I think there's a borrowing and a using of a religious sensibility, paradoxically infused into these later chapters of the deep story.
I mean, this is the one we're in now, right? This is post-election. They stole the election, is his crucifixion, and in some sense now, I told you they'd do that, now we must get even stronger, even firmer. Do you have a sense of where this is going?
I think it's going in two different directions simultaneously. There is a again, we're talking about 46% of Americans who voted for him. I would say the vast majority of them half of them believe that this election was stolen because he told them that. But I think probably 80%, that's just a guess estimate, will back down and say, you know, I think we're not for violence. This has all been a big mistake. It's run amok. It doesn't represent my feelings. I'm law and order. Let's give Biden a chance, I think. But there will be 20 to 30% of that group who will not back down, but will double down and become more self-referential. There will be more extreme sources of news, and they will talk to each other more and more. They will be angry, confused, and I think paranoia will grow. It's very fertile ground for people who are frightened, want a sense of mastery over what's going to happen, and the fact that you can make it up, and that there are, you know, secret forces that you can know about and therefore feel powerful in your knowledge of them. There's a whole world of paranoia that I think is likely to grow for that minority of Trump supporters.
Yeah, paranoia. That's where the conspiracies are fertile. And that's where there's danger to our society in the breakdown in the alternative realities. But there's violent danger, physical danger, real crisis danger in those who have taken it, you know, who have taken up arms.
Right.
In pursuit of those conspiracies or in defense against those conspiracies. The website to find out more about ARLIE's work, just go to berkeley.edu and then search for ARLIE Hochschild. And it's Hochschild is HOCHSCHILD. And the book is Strangers in Their Own Land. For this conversation and many other interviews and articles to join me in pursuit of a world that just might work, go to terencemcnally.net or worldthatjustmightwork.com, the same website. If you want to receive my weekly email announcement of guests, issues, and usually 8 or 10 articles of relevance, you can sign up at my site, or you can email me at temcnally@mac.com, temcnally@mac.com. You can subscribe and listen to the Freeform podcast on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, most major podcast sites. You'll find years of searchable podcasts at my site. For instance, my 2018 conversation with ARLIE, Michael Lewis, Jeremy Scahill, Robert Reich, Van Jones, Connie Rice, you name it. Thanks to George Vasilopoulos at Progressive Voices. And most of all, you, my listeners, please share this podcast widely. Thank you, ARLIE Hochschild. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. You keep up the good work too.